Welcome to another demo video. In this video I'm going to walk through the truth tables related to the fourth video in the propositional logic section of the course. And so these are the demos for truth tables for assessing arguments. The first one we need to do is for that Barbara syllogism. So remember, we knew this was valid in syllogistic form, and we have three variables, A, B, and C. And so remember, I'm going to put the variables here, the problem here, and the solution here. So the problem, such as it is A then B. New premise. So now I create a whole new column. Each statement gets its own column. Then B, then C. Notice in the previous video we didn't have these extra columns because we were doing one statement. Now we're doing multiple statements, and so we have multiple columns. And then we put our conclusion at the end. So what we're essentially going to do is solve three individual statements and look at how they interact after we're done. So with that being said, let's get on with it. So in the first column, we go alternate true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. Next column, double true, double false, double true, double false, and then the last column, 4 trues and 4 falses. Everything I've done so far has been, let's just call it, maybe autopilot, where there's not a lot of thinking involved. This is just all sort of set up. And now we are going to, and I'm going to change color here so you can see the thinking will be in red and the basic will be in black. So now we do our if then. So this is where we got to remember Katniss and the arrow here. So now we're doing A and B. If A, then B. So we want to know the antecedent is A, and the consequence is true, then true. Gives us a result of true. And then that repeats on the next row. The next line, I hit the target, but I didn't get the prize. The deal was broken. And then likewise on the fourth line. On the remaining lines where we miss the target, doesn't really matter if we get the prize or not. It's impossible to break the deal, so they're all true. Now we do exact same process except with these two columns. So now we have true, then true is true. True, then false is false. False, then true is true. False, then false is true. True, then true is true. True, then false is false. False, then true is true. False, then false is true. And then we just keep on rolling now with the variables A and C. So I'm going to look at A, the first column here, and the third column here. So true, then true is true. True, then false is false. True, then true is true. True, then false is false. And then it's going to be true all the way down, like that. And now we've done all the table completing part, but we have to ask ourselves, what was the point of that? What are we trying to do? remember the definition of valid. If the premises are true, conclusion must be true. So we can check here and see, okay, if the true premises lead to a true conclusion, check. And then, so that's true in line 1. Line 2 has a false conclusion, so or false premise, so the conclusion can do whatever it wants. Likewise on lines 3, 4, line 5, true premises lead to a true conclusion. Line 6, we have a false premise, so the conclusion can do whatever it wants. Line 7 and 8, true premises lead to a true conclusion. And so that satisfies this definition. However, there is some efficiency in, we had to check every single value here. There's a more efficient way to do that, which is to imagine we didn't know if it was valid. We would say, let's find the false conclusions and work backwards. If each false conclusion is met by a false premise, that row checks out. And then on line 4, the false conclusion is matched by a false premise, that line checks out. The only two false conclusions here are not significant because they're matched by a false premise. And so notice that that was a lot quicker and easier than checking every single row. So when you see me circle these conclusions and working backwards, that is the most efficient way to do it. And you'll see me, as we go on, we're going to do in subsequent videos, I'll probably use what I call the shortcut method, which will essentially be to complete the conclusion column first, find the false conclusions, and then solve only the values we really, because we could have done just this column and then the two circled values here would have been enough for a proof of validity on this problem. Anyway, so that, as a surprise to no one, not even Tiger was surprised by this one. We knew that this was a valid argument. We essentially had enough syllogistic logic skill to know that it was valid. The next one we're going to do, and I'm sorry for the slight pause there while I was trying to get my computer equipment to work. One we know is a fallacy, and that was all A's are B's, all C's are B's, therefore all A's are C's. We recognize that pretty easily as an undistributed middle. When we do that as a propositional logic form, again we're going to have A, B, and C. A, then B, C, then B, therefore A, then C. I guess I should have switched color back to black. We'll switch in due course. Okay, so there's all of my routine work done. Gets pretty tedious pretty quick. And now we'll do the thinking. And so on row 1, if A, then B, so true, then true is true. Remember, only it's true unless we get true, then false. So on line 2, true. Line 3, there's our hit the target, miss the prize situation. So we got false. That repeats on line 4. And then lines 5 through 8 are all true. C, then B. So now we're going to do this column first. Right? So this is the if, and this is the then. So if C, then B, true, then true is true. False, then true is true. True, then false is false. False, then false is true. True, then true is true. False, then true is true. True, then false is false. False, then false is true. And now we go A, then C. True, then true is true. True, then false is false. True, then true is true. True, then false is false. And then true, 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 true. Now, let's do the reverse engineer, the reversed assessment process. So we're going to find the false conclusions. So one here and one here. Is that matched by at least one false premise? So we work backwards on that row. Look, row 2. True premises lead to a false conclusion. So that is invalid. Remember, the definition of valid is if the premises are true, which they are, then the conclusion must be true, but it's not. So it does not satisfy the definition of validity. This is a tricky concept for a lot of folks to grab. A lot of people are wanting to look at that first line and say, hey, this looks like a pretty good argument. We get true premises leading to a true conclusion. And I'm like, yeah, you can have true, it's possible to have true truths leading to a true conclusion, but it's not mandatory. It's not guaranteed. The second line is what is the interesting part of this proof. The second line shows that it doesn't have to be the case that true premises lead to a true conclusion. Quite the contrary. True premises, at least once out of the 8 options, will lead to a false conclusion. Okay, the next video we're doing, or the next problem we're doing is the drop out of school problem, which hopefully we don't resort to quite yet. But we have 4 variables in this one: Q, P, S, and D. And we have 2 premises and a conclusion. So we'll have 3 columns altogether. The first one is Q and P or S, then D. Remember, it was if my quiz score is low and my pro score is low, or if I allow you to sleep, then you'll drop. Q and pro score are both low, therefore you will drop. And you're going to see why. Notice that this table's going to have 16 lines to it. I'm not even sure we can fit it all on the camera. But you're going to appreciate the efficiency we can introduce here. Remember I told you let's do the conclusion first. Notice it's nice and simple and the premises are a little complicated. So let's do just just what we need to. We call this the shortcut method. So we got to do the whole table. Now, as I'm doing this, I'll say that's 8. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 columns. As I'm doing this, I'll tell you that there are lots of ways to become quick at these truth tables. Your textbook takes you through what it calls the indirect table, and it's beautifully elegant but also completely useless, and I'll tell you why. That method basically asks you, do the truth table in your head and then give us the rows that matter. And my answer to that is, if I could do the truth table in my head, I wouldn't be in this lousy first year critical thinking class. I'd be off getting a PhD from some, first tier university somewhere. So thank you very much. So we want a method that's going to give us results without a whole lot of brilliance and imagination here. So I call this the shortcut method. Notice we set up the whole problem just the way we need to. And this is just about as elegant as it would look on a whiteboard in a classroom. And then we're going to solve our conclusion. Notice that it's going to be true, false, all the way down. Trying to keep my rows equal here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. And now I'm going to circle, maybe switch up our colors again. We're going to find all of our false conclusions. So they're scattered throughout the table here. So for each of those false conclusions, we want to find at least one false premise. So it makes sense to me that let's eliminate as many of these as we can just by doing this pretty easy premise right here. So that's going to be false. Q and P is going to be false when either Q is false or P is false. So on line 2, so looking over here, Q and P are both true, so that's true. On line 4, Q and P are both true, so that's true. On line 6, at least one is false. On line 8, at least one is false. On line 10, at least one is false. And then basically we'll have one false all the rest of the way down. Right? For instance, this last row here. So we can tick off a whole bunch of these rows as being sort of irrelevant to our problem. And so really we have these two rows we have to complete. So, and that's going to be quite a bit of work. There's a lot of going here. Notice that, boy, would we love to leave a lot of this blank. So we have Q and P, or S then D. Well, remember we want to work from outside the brackets to in. So Q and P is true on line 2. Or S is true, so that'll be true. Stroke out the value once you're done with it. D is false. So true, then false. That's when you hit the ergo, but you don't get the prize. So that's false. So that row checks out. On line 4, Q and P is true. S is false. True or false is true. D is false. And so the final result is false. So that checks out. Now, if any of you want to do the rest of this table, please go ahead. Notice the indirect method would have been to say, hey, I can see how this row is the critical, these two rows are the critical ones. That's higher octane thinking than we're really ready for today. But that's okay. All we did was waste a little bit of paper and a little bit of time, not very much. We would have wasted a pile of time if we'd filled in all this area of the table. And if you're like me, you do enough simplistic calculations, whether it be in math or logic, you're going to make a mistake. So I like to do as few as possible. And so by skipping all of those, I reduce the risk of error. I'd rather do a small amount of work really well than a giant amount of work. So that is what so first of all, this is valid. And we call this the shortcut method. The next demonstration that's needed is the statement versus argument. I'll try to do this all on one piece of paper here. Unfortunately, it's a fairly simple argument. So remember, first of all, we have it as a statement for B and L. This is the if my dog bites, then I'll have to leash him. So B, then L, and B, then L. So we're going to solve that. Okay, so I'm going to work here from inside the brackets to out. So B, then L. This is going to be true, false, true, true. We might just copy B down again here. True, true, false, false. And then I bring those two together with the and, so it's true when both individual parts are true. So true and true is true, false and true is false, true and false is false, true and false is false. Stroke out the values that are no longer needed. We essentially, as we go outside the brackets, these ones that were inside the brackets get used up. So this is the result for this operator here. Then L is true, false, true, false. And now we take those two results, combine them here. True then true is true. False then false is true. False then true is true. False then false is true. So our final result is all true, the final column. We call that a tautology. Now, we want to do a statement here. We've done the statement form. Now we want to do the argument form of the same argument. And I'm going to do this kind of right here using the same variables. So we got B, then L, B, therefore L. Okay, notice this is the argument, and this is the statement. So now we can do just the conclusion, true, false, true, false. We find the two values, the two rows that are what we need. So on row 2, B is true. And on row 2, B, then L, true, then false. So that's false here. So that row checks out. On row 4, B is false. So that checks out. Now, remember my comments in the face video showing you, or suggested that you would prefer this as being simpler. This is valid, by the way. Right? This is simpler. Look, we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 values. Most of which were just copying out what was already here. Just putting things in the right places. This one, we did 8, 12, 16 values, some of which was fairly complex, screwing around with all these brackets and stuff. Okay? So this is less than half the work. So we want, this is better because it's simpler. They are logically equivalent. Okay? These are logically equivalent methods, except one is just better to work with. So whenever possible, we want to translate arguments in this form with simple premises and conclusion, rather than a single complex statement. So if someone asks you on a quiz, for instance, why would you prefer these staccato style, extremely short, extremely brief premise conclusion form rather than say assessing the literal translation of the argument as a single long complex statement? It's because it's simpler, less risk of error, and since they're logically equivalent, you're guaranteed the same result either way. Okay, we just have a couple more to do. We wanted to test a couple arguments for validity. The first one was the unemployment levels go up or there will be a revolt. Employment levels are not going up, therefore there will be revolt. So let's get that in form first. First premise. Employment levels up, so we have to have sometimes a little bit of a legend here. E equals employment levels up. and let R, there will be a revolt. Okay, so with that being said, we have either E, employment levels up, or the little wedge is the symbol for that, there will be a revolt. Second premise, employment levels are not going up, so that's not E. Therefore, there will be a revolt. So now to assess that in truth table, okay, everything I've got so far is pretty much automatic. Now I'm going to solve the conclusion, which really is just transferring this data over to here. So it's true, false. There's no logical operators in the conclusion, so it's exactly the same value. Okay, so then I find the false conclusions and work backwards. So I need values, to fill in these gaps here. E is true, then not E is false. Check. Line 4, E is true, so not E is false. Not E is true. And then on line 4, the first column, E or R, false or false is false. And so that line checks out. So we see this as being valid. Next one, and this is the last one of this video. This is the honey organic example. Okay, so the honey is organic if it has not been exposed. So we've got O for organic. E goes is exposed to synthetic chemicals, and the production of this honey required synthetic antibiotics. I think that means that E is true. Therefore, it's obvious this honey is not organic. So, not exposed, then it's organic. And, new premise, production of honey requires synthetic antibiotics. So that is, it is exposed, therefore it's not organic. Okay, so having set the problem up, notice I take all of this and put it there as we're thinking of that as our problem. These are our input variables. These are their possible values. Now I solve. So And again, I'm going to solve the conclusion first. So if O is true, not O is false. O is false, not O is true. False, true. Okay, so I'm taking these values, essentially inverting them using the tilde to get the opposite value. So I need to solve these rows. E is true. And then on line 3, E is false. So that line checks out. So now I just need to solve this value here. So, and I need to get this not done first. So E is true, not E is false. Then true. And then that would result in true. So you can see that here we have true premises leading to a false conclusion. This is invalid. All of this stuff here is not needed. Okay. That's enough for today. Have a great day, everyone.